I have a question for you. Has Canada lost her democracy? Clearly, I think the answer is yes. A man in Kelowna, BC is fined $2,300 for organizing a lockdown protest that he attended. A woman in Toronto is shamed by a COVID Karen for not wearing a mask in a dollar store. A man in Nova Scotia is fined because he had the temerity to question a police bully when he stopped in at a Tim Hortons to buy a donut. We've suffered 10 months of lockdown, yet COVID is still with us. What is Doug Ford's solution? Another lockdown, because the other ones worked so well. It gets worse. A man in Toronto had the nerve to try to earn a living and keep his restaurant open. The response? A vindictive petty bureaucrat, Dr. Eileen Davila, Toronto's medical officer, ordered 75 cops, 6 mounted on horses decked out in riot gear, to arrest this one man. Why? Because she was pissed off that he defied her order. Even though it was illegal, the Toronto police did her bidding. Who's in charge here? Others are arrested arbitrarily for protesting because the police tyrants and their puppet masters don't like it when you don't do what you're told. How dare you? Who do you think you are? A citizen? With rights? It gets worse. The city of Toronto created a secret file on journalists who dared to report on the non-permitted occupation of Nathan Phillips Square by a group called Afro-Indigenous Rising. Don't tell me Mayor John Tory didn't know they were spying on journalists. Now there's a fine Canadian tradition for you. The journalists were trespassed from Nathan Phillips Square for reporting on the squatters, while the city and police, who sent 75 cops after one restaurant owner, did nothing about the illegal occupation of the square. Welcome to the People's Republic of Ontario. It gets worse. The National Post on January 21st, 2021, reported that some group you've never heard of wants to suspend the need for consent before withdrawing life support when COVID crushes hospitals. That's not too scary, is it? Who the hell are these people? Apparently, there's an organization called COVID-19 Bioethics Table that made the request to suspend the law so that doctors can pull the plug whenever they want. These folks obviously flunked the ethics exam. The document by this COVID-19 Bioethics Table was prepared on behalf of another unknown organization, Ontario's Critical Care COVID Command Center. Ever heard of them? Who are they? Dr. James Downer, head of the Division of Palliative Care at the University of Ottawa, is a member of this COVID-19 Bioethics Table. The good Dr. Death said, "We're talking about a scenario where the focus is no longer on the individual himself, but now on our population as a whole." He clearly believes in the socialist collective rather than the democratic rights of the individual. Keep this guy far away from your loved ones or kiss their ass goodbye. Ontario has pushed this narrative for some time now that hospitals are getting overwhelmed. The problem is the numbers just don't add up. Pre-pandemic, Ontario had about 1,800 critical care beds. The hospitals asked for another 900. Doug Ford, in his infinite wisdom, gave them another 1,800, for a total of around about 3,500 beds. The numbers are approximate, don't hang me if I'm off a little bit. Even though the government and their hospital chums claim a pending shortage of beds, their own stats tell a very different story. As of January 20th, 2021, there were 395 people in ICU in Ontario. Ontario has 3,500 ICU beds. Where's the crisis? There were 296 in ICU on a ventilator. There are 2,800 ICU beds with ventilators. Where is the crisis? Meanwhile, there are COVID treatments being successfully used around the world. but Canadian or Ontario governments won't even take a look at them. They'd rather just kill Granny. Now here's a Muppet newsflash. They're lying to you. There is no crisis in Ontario hospitals. There is no need to kill Granny. Speaking of killing a Granny, 75% of deaths in Ontario were in long-term care facilities that are regulated by the government. That's criminal negligence on the part of Doug Ford and his administration. So how can you still have COVID cases and deaths in long-term care facilities today? Have they learned nothing? Clearly, Doug and his friends just don't care. We're all in this together, Doug Ford said. That's a lie. He still gets his salary, but you don't get yours. Dr. Davila gets her $300,000 salary while sending the cops to arrest a guy who just wants to work. The cops get their salaries while breaking up the law. Breaking up people, that is, breaking the law to harass and arrest people just because those people don't want to be harassed or arrested. But they don't get to make that decision, do they? Doug Ford tells you, you must stay home to stop the spread of COVID, but it didn't stop him from going to a wedding or to his cottage. Rod Phillips, the oh-so-dedicated Ontario Minister of Finance, zips off to St. Bart's for a vacation. His crime was he got caught, and then he got fired by Doug Ford for doing what Doug Ford did. And how about the charming mayor of Brampton, Patrick Brown? He closes all the rinks in Brampton, then invites his buds to play hockey each week at one of the arenas. When caught by a journalist, he has Peel Regional Police arrest the journalist for trespassing. That's fair. That's honest. That's Patrick, and that's the Peel Regional Police. I apologize to anyone in Ontario who's offended by this next statement. If you believe anything any of these government people, elected or unelected, have to say, you can't be playing with a full deck. How many times do you have to be deceived before the light bulb goes on? These government goons are drunk with power. Doesn't seem to matter if they're conservatives or liberals or NDP. They love the tyranny as long as they're calling the shots, or as they prefer to call it, following the science. You trust them at your peril. They don't give a rat's rump about you or democracy. So you think you have rights? Think again. Time for a refresher course on Canadian democracy. The Diefenbaker 1960s Bill of Rights got it right. Then Pierre Trudeau changed it to the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in 1982. I'll bet you think you have these rights from the Charter. Freedom of conscience and religion, freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and expression, including freedom of the press and other media communication, freedom of peaceful assembly, and freedom of association. Well, you don't. I'll bet you think you have this right. Everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of person, and the right not to be deprived thereof, except in accordance with the principles of fundamental justice. Well, you don't, and here's why. There's a cute little clause in the Charter that says your rights are subject only to such reasonable limits as prescribed by law. Any right or freedom that is prefaced with subject to is not a right or a freedom. It's a nothing burger. It's smoke and mirrors. Answer these questions. What's reasonable? Who gets to decide? You actually lost your rights in 1982. They just sleazed it past you when you weren't looking. Pierre took your rights way back then. Pierre Light is enforcing it today. Think that's hyperbole? Here's an example of their actions. Ezra Levant of Rebel News was recently fined $3,000 for publishing a book critical of Trudeau and the Liberals around the time of the last election. He was found guilty without a trial. He couldn't attend and defend himself. So much for the True North strong and free, eh? When did guilty by secret trial become a Canadian value? So what's the answer to this situation? Rise up, Canada. Take back your democracy from the bullies and tyrants. Put your kids back in school. If the teachers don't show up, fire them. Hire people who actually want to teach. I call on the Canadian Federation of Independent Business to forget their petition. Don't tell Doug Ford you understand. Don't agree to strict capacity limits. Quit begging. It's so weak and wimpy. Let people use their common sense. They'll make better decisions than Doug and friends or Trudeau. The individuals below tried to reopen their businesses. They were bullied and fined because they stood alone. Kyle Thompson of Belleville, Ontario, barbershop and haberdashery. Zach Bazinois, a foot above fitness located in Orleans, Ontario. George Avalos, the general manager of Chuck's Roadhouse in Aurora. Derek Noble, owner of Noble Toys in Bolton. Karthik Raj and Barbara Bush, The Point of Light, a New Age shop located in Newmarket. Mitch Hewison, owner of Futuristic Fitness in Arthur, Ontario. Adam Skelly, the owner of Adamson Barbecue. Adam Skelly was arrested by those 75 cops. If you stand alone, the government bullies can pick you off one at a time. They have no problem enforcing illegal and immoral laws, just because they can. If every business on just 1 or 2 blocks opens up, they won't be able to bully you. If 100,000 businesses open up on the same day, there is nothing governments or police can do about it. I'd like to see the Canadian Federation of Independent Business organize that rather than some wimpy petition. Work together with all other business associations, such as Restaurant Canada, to open the country back up. They can't stop the will of the people when the people speak with one voice. Rise up, speak up, take action. To read more, go to larkindigital.com/rise. And thanks for listening.